Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and this is a Christmas Eve edition of Wilder Wolves. Happy holidays, everybody. Hopefully, you're having a great time with your friends, your family, your loved ones. Hopefully, the Timberwolves are giving you a big reason for Christmas cheer because this Timberwolves team is on absolute fire right now. Since Thanksgiving, the Timberwolves have tied the best record in the NBA during that stretch, and the team that they're tied with, San Antonio Spurs, in the third best record in that stretch, the New York Knicks at 9-3. And the common denominator, you might ask, the Timberwolves have beaten both teams in that stretch. So Minnesota is taking care of the best teams. I'll also add the team below, as of yesterday, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Minnesota beat the Thunder too recently. So this Timberwolves team, we talked about it early in the season, this team not being able to take care of really good teams while dominating the lower weight classes. That's changing right now. Minnesota is beating the good teams. They didn't beat a fully healthy Spurs or Knicks team. I will say that in fairness, but I will also say that Knicks game, Tyler Kolek looked pretty good. And then you also look at the Spurs game, and the Spurs were, even though they were missing Wemby, winning a lot of games without him. So Minnesota is just taking care of the schedule right now, and that's all you can ask for this team. Before we get started in today's show, I am so thrilled to tell you guys about the first ever Wilder Wolves podcast sponsor, 612 Tees. 612 offers a wide range of uniquely designed Minnesota sports tees, and you can see these awesome Timberwolves options right here. Because I am chronically online, the one that resonates with me is the Wizard of Nas t-shirt, because I've spent a lot of time making memes, and I once made a Wizard of Nas meme, so it comes to life in this t-shirt, and I am definitely going to buy one. But there's not only Timberwolves tees here, because you can look up here. There's a ton of different sports. You can also get crew necks, accessories, etc. There's a lot of Nas Reed agenda right here, and we always promote a Nas Reed agenda on Wilder Wolves. And then you see this really sick Justin Jefferson crew neck. Use the code Wilder25 to get 25% off your first purchase. It's a great way to support a small business, and it also helps this show out quite a bit, so definitely check them out. Please hit subscribe to this podcast, because Wilder Wolves Podcast is a growing Timberwolves community where we just follow the team from both a journalistic but also fan perspective of this squad. It is a platform where we're growing as a community. We're making sure everybody's voices are heard and included, and you have an opportunity to be on the show on Wolves Fandom Friday. If you want to be on a future Wolves Fandom Friday episode, you can always email me, wilder@wilderadams.com, or DM me What's on Tap NBA on Instagram or X. So definitely join this platform, hit subscribe, like this video, would so sincerely appreciate it. And now let's get right into today's episode, because we're coming off of a really fun and sentimental New York Knicks game. Minnesota beats the New York Knicks, and Karl-Anthony Towns made his second return to the Twin Cities, and this one was more favorable for the Timberwolves because last year the Knicks walked into Target Center, demolished the Timberwolves, and we were just really looking at this team like, did we just really screw up the cat trade? And that was when the team looked really dark to start last year, and then they finished last year strong. So we get a second look. Both teams make the conference finals, now back at Target Center after one full season, and the Timberwolves, they took care of business. Anthony Edwards looked like a superstar. 34 through his first three quarters, 38 to finish the game. His shot making, I thought his feel for the game, even with only a couple assists, the dude he had full control of the game. His playmaking was good. His three-level shot making, he's just become arguably the three best level scorer in the league. So Anthony Edwards is just on a different level right now. We can go on and on and on about Anthony Edwards, but the story of the night, it was Karl-Anthony Towns versus Julius Randle. And of course, when you love something from the past, right? Whether it's your childhood or maybe an activity you did or a school you went to, sometimes you romanticize the past, right? You remember all the great things about it. You kind of forget the day-to-day, like maybe you didn't like going to school that day, but you didn't realize at that time being a kid is easier than being an adult. And then now you reflect on it and you're like, you know what? I really appreciate that time in my life. I wish I can go and spend one day back in time right there. That happens to everybody. And I think we definitely have that with Karl-Anthony Towns because the dude is just so special. He was a great basketball player and, more importantly, a fantastic person who really embraced being a Minnesota athlete. And we all know how unique that is We know that doesn't come around every single month. That's just not a normal thing where a star is that out there appreciating a Minnesota team that wasn't winning a lot at that time. He went through all the ups and downs, and we all love and appreciate him for that. And we also, I think, even though the Timberwolves made the conference finals, there is some fair debate. Was the trade the right move? And I do think it was. I'm sure a lot of us do, but that has been a debate. And then we see Karl Anthony Towns come back. He gets a standing ovation, and it kind of makes me feel like at some point he is going to come back and just finish his career off in Minnesota, the place where he's loved and embraced. He was homegrown here, kind of like Kevin Garnett. Maybe he pulls a KG and comes back his last couple years. I think that's really possible. So I will say that about Cap because he does deserve that respect and that appreciation because he is one of the greatest Timberwolves of all time. But then the game starts, and then somebody has to beat the other team. He killed us last year. He played Minnesota in Target Center this year. Went differently. Best case scenario for Minnesota, I would say Cat gets 40. The Timberwolves get the win. That was best case scenario. But I think this was so great of a game because it kind of reminded us why the trade happened in a lot of ways. Of course, most importantly, it was the Cap situation. And that is definitely true, not to beat around the bush. But another part of it is we saw what happens with a Karl Anthony Towns led team. They look good the first three quarters. Karl Anthony Towns, amazing player, highly productive. And then late in the game, it's a close game. Minnesota kept getting leads. New York kept crawling back. And then the fourth quarter happens. And what happens? Karl Anthony Towns, his fourth quarter production went down. You could tell his frustration with the refs really started to hit a climax where it took himself out of the game. And he did that for years in Minnesota. He would get into foul trouble. He fouled out, by the way. He would get into those episodes where he's completely trying to sell a foul to the refs. And then you get the flailing, you get the screaming, and then you just remember, right? Like, this is why the breakup happened. And then Minnesota, they get in a rhythm. They close the game out. And why did they close the game out? It's because of the person that they acquired in that trade. And that was Julius Randle. Julius Randle was terrible his first three quarters. I think he only had 8 points his first three quarters, if I remember properly. And then he finished the game with 25 points, 10 for 20 shooting. And I think he started the game like 2 for 10. So Julius Randle went crazy. And when the game was sort of tight, when the Knicks still had a shot to win, what does Julius Randle do? He scores 15 straight points, 17 points in the fourth quarter. And Minnesota, they had a cushion with a few minutes left in the game that New York couldn't recover from. And the difference there was a lot of it, Karl Anthony Towns distracted, not really producing in that time. Julius Randle closing the game. I love Karl Anthony Towns. Love Karl Anthony Towns. But it reminds you of some of the things that we probably would still be experiencing if he was still on the team. He does get distracted sometimes. He does let emotion get to him. And then that just really deflates his own production and evaporates the momentum of his own team. That's kind of what happened in the fourth. And then Julius Randle, when Anthony Edwards had a more quiet fourth quarter, when he was sitting out early on and they just needed somebody to close the game without Ant, Julius Randle was the guy who came in, take over, get to his own spots. And it's literally poetic in a lot of ways because I think this trade turned out great for both teams. I think New York, they made the conference finals with the Cat. First time in like 25 plus years that they made the conference finals. And Cat's been an all-NBA player for them. He and Brunson, arguably the most devastating offensive tandem in the Eastern Conference. But we also see why Minnesota is better off in this trade too. Of course, the Cap, right? You get Randall, you get Dante, you get Beringer, who I still think is going to be really good in Minnesota. And that makes a lot of sense. But also on the court, Minnesota just always needed a second creator who can get easy shots against the majority of the league. And Julius Randle, he is struggling. He is not showing up. But what does he do? He gets the ball, he creates, he gets to the rim, gets space, and completely takes over with his own individual shot creation. He wasn't reliant on everybody else to create shots. Cat is one of those players, as special as he is. A lot of his offense is produced by how he's getting fed, right? If you have Cat create for himself too much from the perimeter, you're just going to get a lot of offensive fouls. But Julius Randle was able to create. I'll also add, even though Dante only had 11, he also had a backbreaker 3 in the fourth quarter there. So I just thought that it showed the difference where I think Julius Randle provides a shot creation element that this team really could use outside of Ant. He also adds sort of a toughness, less of a, devastating, evaporating type energy when things aren't going his way. And just more on-ball versatility. I just think Randall just showcased why, on top of the money, financial reasons, why he's simply a better fit here in Minnesota, and that doesn't take away from Cat. Still a top 25 player in the league. I would argue Randall's in that range too, and it's just a better fit here for Randall in Minnesota, and then Cat in New York. Better fit there. Julius Randle, I think, also got exhausted by the attention that he got being a primary player in New York, right? Because he came in, he kind of saved the New York Knicks, and then Jalen Brunson comes in, and there's that identity crisis there. Some of Randall's inconsistencies, his inefficiencies, they really shine when he's initially the guy. And also now there's kind of a question on who actually is the guy when Brunson really ascended. It just didn't work out in New York. So then he goes to Minnesota, where he's the no question number two option, and he just adds what Minnesota needed, which was more offensive creation. And what do you know? Even in Minnesota's best year with Rudy, Cat, and Ant, they're the 17th ranked offense. And now this year, for the second straight year, they're a top 10 offense. Minnesota's better off for that. And also, same thing for Cat. He goes to New York, his hometown. Jalen Brunson's the indisputed number one guy on the team. And Cat can just play ball. He could just play ball. And I think Cat's having an up and down year so far this year. He's dealing with some injuries. And I think we also saw in Minnesota, him moving to the four does take away a little bit of his, slashing ability, because he is pretty reliant on being faster than his opponent when he slashes. And he's faster than a five, but he's usually not faster than a four. So there's some limitations about putting him at the four. And now New York is putting him at the four next to Mitchell Robinson. And I do think that has a slight impact on Cap. But look, he dropped 40 on Minnesota. He looked great. He's still fantastic, highly productive. But I think this game was just very telling on why Minnesota made the deal. They're not only a more flexible team now, they got all these great contracts. The Randall contract's fantastic. The Nas is good. The Rudy, who we're talking about soon, is really good. They have a lot of good contracts. McDaniels, of course, but also it's a more flexible and more versatile team. And I think that gives Minnesota a higher ceiling as they continue these next steps in their roster development, which they have the flexibility to capitalize on because they don't have three supermax contracts anymore. So it was a great day because Cat was embraced, because he deserves that. Hopefully he comes back. And then it also just kind of showed both Minnesota and New York, Cat and Randall's beauties and their flaws, right? Even early in the game, Julius Randle, kind of inefficient. You could tell he was frustrated, started really hot, kind of disappears. And then it's like, whoa, he's 2 for 11 all of a sudden. Randle, of course, not perfect, needs to be more efficient sometimes, more consistent. But Randle also provides qualities that helps this team immensely offensively. And he showcased why he's so special in his own right, right? He shouldn't have to live in Karl Anthony Towns' shadow. He should live in his own, embracing Minnesota and Minnesota embracing him type platform. We see him at Wild games. We see him around town. He's a good dude. He's a good dude. In life, sometimes things don't go the way you want. You have to make a sacrifice. You have to move on for this person. You have to move on from this place, make a tough decision. And that's all it was. It was unfortunately a tough decision Minnesota had to make on the Karl Anthony Towns trade, but we also saw a lot of the evidence why they did it and why Minnesota is 20-10 right now, one of the hottest teams in the NBA. And they seem to be on an upward trajectory. So it was a very great night. It was really great to see Karl Anthony Towns, really great to get a W, continue this momentum heading into the holidays. So it was just a great game all around, and it was incredible. So now let's transition to another player that I think deserves a lot of highlight, or spotlight, I should say, with his play this season, and somebody that I was very openly tough on to start the season, but he deserves all the flowers in the world, and that is Rudy Gobert. Because Rudy, he started the year a little iffy, I thought. I thought there was a big disparity between the way he was playing against good teams and bad teams, his first handful of games, he was averaging like 6-6 against really good teams. And that includes a team like the Knicks. He had a really bad first game against New York. And it was frustrating. It was worrisome that his production dipped when the center quality matched what he is. And then also the offensive stuff with the catching, with he's still 52% on the line, right? I mean, I was worried that he was regressing, but Rudy Gobert, he's showcasing that not only is he not regressing, he's all the way back, and he should be in the thick of the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Victor Wembanyama is going to be the favorite every year for the rest of his career, but we'll see if he gets to 65 games. And after that, is there really a better option than Rudy Gobert for Defensive Player of the Year? The Timberwolves this season, guys, 11 points better with Rudy Gobert on the court than off defensively. There's over a 15% difference in just rim to turns field goal percentage at the rim when Rudy's contesting versus not. He makes that big of a difference at the rim. He makes that big of a difference on the court. And also, we add to that, Rudy Gobert is one of the very best switching defenders in the NBA this year. I'm not entirely sure what the stat is, the update on that, but Rudy Gobert, as of like a week or two ago, was the number one on-ball perimeter defender in the league per possession. And that's with like 50-plus situations where he's guarding on the perimeter. That was the baseline for that stat. So Rudy Gobert is providing A-plus level rim protection. He's defending in the perimeter the best he has in his career. Defensively, Minnesota is significantly better with him on than off the court. And now I'm going to mention something that isn't statistical because this matters. And I think a lot of fans, this is kind of why he gets a bad rep for casual fans, because he doesn't pass the eye test. And that can be frustrating sometimes. But Rudy Gobert, and I've told people this, I've told my dad this the other day, Rudy Gobert just doesn't have enough FU plays. Like, Rudy's a really smart guy. I think he's a highly intelligent guy. He has a great feel for what is likely the analytically correct position, which is why he's such an analytical god. But they're also just those emotional decisions that you also have to balance that kind of hype up the rest of the squad, that kind of engage everybody, that establish a tone that the numbers can't measure. And Rudy hasn't been great at that in Minnesota. Where's the FU blocks? Where's the big rebound? Where's the occasional calculated risk? I'm going out of position to send a message. I'm just going to not take that crap. Rudy Gobert lately is getting those FU moments. That Grizzlies game, the one I think he got ejected in, I'm not saying he should do this and get ejected, but he is becoming more openly physical. He is going for those out of position FU blocks. He is responding when he consistently gets hit in the head by other offensive players, because Rudy Gobert, I feel bad for the guy because he always gets in spots where he's always taking the beating. And then one time he responds, the offensive player either exaggerates or just stands out like a sore thumb. And then Rudy Gobert gets in trouble for it when everybody else just gets away with it. Rudy Gobert isn't having that crap lately. The Grizzlies game, the one he got ejected, he kind of had a push in the back, not condoning that. But I will also say I don't think he deserved an ejection for that, even though the technical definition of a flagrant 2 is something that puts a defender or offensive player in a harmful position and was deliberate. Both are technically true, but I still wouldn't have ejected him. And then also the Knicks game yesterday where Josh Hart tried to trip him, and all Rudy Gobert did was play clean physical defense, but Josh Hart just took it emotionally. I just love this version of Rudy. And in the Knicks game, he was going out of his way for these freaking awesome swats. Great timing, but then he had one where he went out of position on the left side of the court. If I remember, beautiful swat there. Rudy Gobert is just doing that lately, and he's playing better against high-level teams. Like, I'll mention these three teams who I would say have a lot of really good big men, okay? So his last three games in the recent games, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and New York, right? We can all agree those teams have a plethora of physical big men. The Grizzlies, they started three of them. New York, they have Cat, they have Robinson. The Thunder, they have Chet, Hartenstein, and all their beautiful floppers. In those three games, Rudy Gobert, 10.3 points a game, whatever, 16.7 rebounds per game, and 2.3 blocks per game. I don't give a living crap about points with Rudy Gobert against great teams. What I care about is, can you dominate the glass? Get those freaking rebounds. Help us win the possession battle. Devastate somebody in the paint. And while you're devastating that person in the paint, simultaneously, you're getting everybody else on your team the mojo to get going in offense, because we know the personality of this team. This team is very responsive to big plays, big energy boosts. And if Rudy Gobert can be a source of that, which he has been lately, that makes him the second most valuable player on the team, even over Julius, even over Jaden. And that's the version we're getting of Rudy. As Chris Finch said yesterday, this is Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. You might not see it in the stats in terms of pure blocks. 1.5 blocks a game. It's okay, not great. About just under a steal a game. The blocks aren't going to show you it, but lately you can just watch it. The never minds are there. Now the FU blocks are there. The FU rebounds are there. And the difference between when this team has Rudy Gobert on and off the court defensively is massive. And of course, a part of it is that Randle and Nas have not been great defensively as a pairing together. But another part of it is just Rudy Gobert is really freaking good at the game of basketball. And he's playing very similar to the level where he won Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. And that season, I thought he should have also made an All-NBA team. I thought he should have also made an All-Star team, and he didn't get the credit he deserves. And the craziest part of all this nonsense, Rudy Gobert is like 8th in the Defensive Player of the Year race in ratings, because people are getting sick of Rudy Gobert, the voter fatigue. It's like everybody is so terrified of getting Rudy Gobert his 5th Defensive Player of the Year. Even if at the end of the year, Wemby doesn't play enough, in that scenario, he'll probably deserve it if he continues the play he's showcased the last 10 or so games. Who cares about that, though, right? Because Rudy, at the end of the day, as much as we would want him to win another Defensive Player of the Year, he's probably never going to get the credit he deserves, because now he's kind of a championship away from being cemented by the media. Other than that, he's not going to get the credit, which is unfortunate. It's wrong. It's just unfair. But that's a reality we're living in. But that's why we as fans, and this is why the Timberwolves fans, I think, are the smartest in the NBA. We recognize Rudy Gobert. We recognize his dominance. We recognize the improvement he's showcased from the beginning to right now. And he looks in fantastic shape. He looks disciplined. He looks confident. He looks comfortable. I just think Rudy Gobert is in for a really fantastic finish to the year. And I just love seeing this version of Rudy Gobert, because if they can have this version of Rudy Gobert be this bankable throughout the playoffs, that's why you mentioned Minnesota in those conversations with the Denvers of the world, with the Thunders, with even the Spurs right now. Rudy Gobert is a big part of why this team can be a contender. Once again, why this team can become a Western Conference Finals team at their peak. And maybe if something happens right, maybe this team goes further than they have the last couple of years. Rudy Gobert needs to be excellent in those best case scenarios. And fortunately for Minnesota fans, he is being that excellent player. Rudy Gobert has been absolutely special lately. And now let's talk about another thing where it's not as glowing as the first two topics. I think both needed to be mentioned, but this one's more of a macro topic. And this is something that we all wanted to work out. But sometimes in life, you're going to have moments where it's not over, but you're starting to feel the end. You're starting to feel this isn't working. This isn't working out. And that's what's happening with Minnesota and Rob Dillingham, in my opinion. Mike Conley came back on Sunday against the Milwaukee Bucks in that weird game. Minnesota snuck out. Mike Conley was the reason in a lot of ways they won that game. He was a plus 18, super efficient, super good. But Bones Highland still played. Mike Conley played. Rob Dillingham on the bench at the same spot as he was recently, where it's a dude who needs his confidence back. He needs his reps to really get going offensively again. And Minnesota is just not in a position where they can give him those reps where they really need him. And I've looked at the point guard rumors, and they're always all over the place with the Timberwolves. I mean, now they're connected with Colin Sexton after being connected to Kobe White, after being connected to Darius Garland, to LaMelo Ball, to John Morant, you name it, you name it. Minnesota's associated with any point guard with a living pulse who could be at the deadline. And that's pretty telling. Like, there's a solid chance this team could acquire a point guard at the deadline. And if that scenario happens, and I'm just going to predict, I have no sourcing on this, I'm just making a prediction. I think this is going to happen. I think they'll get some sort of point guard. But in that sort of scenario, I think Rob Dillingham is going to be in the deal because most likely it's going to cost a contract plus a young player. In Minnesota right now, the most tradable young player on the team is probably Rob Dillingham, eighth overall pick last year, has some upside, right? Terrence Shannon has struggled, but unlike him versus Rob, Rob has youth on his side. Terrence Shannon's 25 years old. So Rob Dillingham still has intrigue. I just think it's the end, guys. I hate to say it. I think we are getting close to Rob Dillingham getting traded. That's my prediction. It just hasn't been the right fit in Minnesota. Rob Dillingham was the eighth overall pick because of his shot making, because his special offensive potential. And I do believe that is there. I think the speed is still there. I think the burst is still there. I don't believe you just lose the ability to hit jump shots unless it's purely psychological. And if it is purely psychological, that means it can come back. So I don't think Rob Dillingham just isn't a good player. I just think he came to Minnesota. There's kind of a big disparity in what the team needed of him and what he needed, right? Because I'll say this in the most loving way possible. Rob Dillingham, he's an overtime star, social media sensation, went to Kanye's high school, is one of the best freshmen in the country in college, playing at a premier program, Kentucky, goes to the NBA as a lottery pick. I think any of us would have a lot of confidence in that scenario with that type of resume. But then he goes to Minnesota, and Minnesota, it's a contender team. That's not very common. And then you're on a team that's a contender. So Rob Dillingham walks on the roster all of a sudden after being the best player on every team of his life. Now he's the 10th best player on the team. And now he isn't that elite player on the squad. And there's some adjusting there. And then you have Chris Finch, who people want to say, like, fire Chris Finch, fire Chris Finch. Chris Finch wins basketball games, guys. Chris Finch, unless something drastic happened, is safe, and he's probably the best coach of franchise history. But I will say this about Chris Finch, and this probably helps why he wins a lot in the regular season, but you could tell the European background with the way Chris Finch coaches. He's super detail-oriented, very team-oriented. He's very favorable to veterans, and he's tough on young players. That's how it is in Europe. Chris Finch has that European DNA. So Chris Finch, from that European culture, where in Europe, you play a role. Even the stars, you play a specific role. If you're young, you have to work really hard to earn an opportunity. Like at Real Madrid, Luka Doncic, before he won the MVP, he probably wouldn't have won the MVP if Milos Teodosic or Facundo Campazzo never tore his ACL. But Facundo Campazzo got injured, so they needed Luka Doncic to be the starting point guard, and then he became an MVP in Europe. It's really hard as a young player to get opportunity, and Luka was definitely better than Facundo Campazzo. So Rob Dillingham's in a spot where he just has to earn an opportunity. In Minnesota, they need a point guard, a true point guard, somebody who is pesking passing lanes, who sets up the offense, and the scoring comes secondary. That's just so different from how Rob Dillingham played. And Rob Dillingham, credit to him, is getting significantly better at those playmaking chops as a defender. Like, he's almost 10th percentile in every metric when it comes to like creating turnovers, deflections, steals. He's gotten very good at those things, but simultaneously, he's lost his confidence as a scorer. I think he feels the leash that is on him. And I just personally think Rob Dillingham needs to go to a young team where he gets those reps, plays through those mistakes, plays losing basketball until he figures out how to win, like the Pistons have recently, and et cetera, et cetera. That's not Minnesota. Minnesota, while a pretty young team in some ways, they're trying to win a championship. And they have a really tough coach, a really good coach, a tough coach, though. That's not the right Rob Dillingham fit. And I think Rob Dillingham deserves the opportunity to play somewhere else, give himself a chance to prove he is an NBA player in a way where he does gain confidence in what made him special. He didn't become a lottery pick because he was this like defensive sensation or Steve Nash level passer. He can pass some. He's showing he has more defensive talent than he thought, or many thought he did. But he was a lottery pick because he's a scorer. And he can't score right now because I just think I don't know the story, but clearly his confidence is just shot. He went from attacking Jaren Jackson Jr. in the paint to I never see him make a layup. The jump shot, he more often than not passes on jump shots. I just don't think it's going to work out in Minnesota. And I think for both sides, if Minnesota can land a quality guard without messing up its rotation, and Rob Dillingham is a part of that deal, and he goes to a team where he can get 15 plus minutes and to some extent lean back into that scoring and develop that way, play through mistakes, that's probably the mutually best spot. It's really hard to have your cake and eat it too, where you're winning and you're also having this A plus rebuild. What the Thunder did is freakish, and they did that from the heart of a rebuild. They didn't do that from the heart of they already had these one now veterans, and then they got young players and they developed them while not playing them. Doing that's impossible. Look at the Warriors. Look at what Steve Kerr had with Kuminga and Wiseman and Moody and all of these guys. It's really hard to do that unless you have the right fits. Like I'm positive about like a Johan Jay working out in Minnesota because he plays a role and Finch likes players like that. And also Jay is used to that European style coaching, that tough coaching that holds a lot of accountability on players. Jay is used to that. He grew up in that in the last 4 years. Not Rob Dillingham. Very different environment, not the right personality fit for the role that this team has for him. And it's unfortunate. They trade 2 first-round picks pretty much, a pick swap and a first, just to find out that Rob Dillingham is probably not the best personality fit or cultural fit. Or I'm not trying to position him as like a bad dude. Like I think Dillingham's a cool dude, and Andrew Dukowitz has talked about he's such a nice guy, hard worker, all those things. But that can be true and also acknowledge it's not the best fit. And I think that with Dillingham not playing again, I think a part of that is the team's accepting that too. And Tim Connolly is a smart guy. He's not going to make every draft pick right. He's not going to make every decision right, but he's very good at recovering, I would say. And I think Tim Connolly, if I had to just infer, just guess, I think he's going to reach the conclusion that Rob Dillingham should be traded. So it's unfortunate that I think that and feel that way, but here we are. So yeah, those are my 3 takeaways from this game and generally for today's show. We are going to close out by reacting to you guys because I think it's pretty cool. So I reached out and asked just Timberwolves 20-10. What do you guys think of this team? And I was expecting good engagement because this community does a great job engaging. But on Twitter, when I asked that, guys, I had over 110 responses. And that's fantastic. And of course, we don't have time to go through 110 responses, but I will say most of it was positive and, people talking about patience and they're on their way. And there's a few tweets I want to highlight, though, that provide some decent points that we could talk about. So somebody named Worker Drone 3 comments, my main concerns are 1, now they are entering a tough schedule and are only the 5th seed. 2, young guys, especially Rob, are struggling. Questioning Chris Finch's coaching. 3, Ant supporting cast is inconsistent except for Gobert. 4, aging point guard issues. And those are all issues. Those are all fair questions. I'm not sure if any of them are like red flags, but they're all definitely yellow flags. And I think that Minnesota, even though I don't know their exact record right now against the best teams in the league right now, but I think we've seen lately with these recent wins against OKC, San Antonio, the Knicks, even injured, or the Celtics, they are starting to win against these teams, which I think is progress. Sure, some of these teams aren't fully healthy. That's the nature of the league. They're winning without these stars. I don't want to hear that. They're beating good teams right now. And Minnesota has had games where they're missing Ant, missing Jaden. It's not like they're perfectly healthy all the time either. But it is definitely worth mentioning that it's going to be interesting to see how they play a fully loaded Denver Nuggets team on Christmas. How do they look? In the past, they've owned Denver. Earlier in the year, did not look like that at all. Can Minnesota recover and showcase that this recent win streak was a dominant one? I think that's something we have to look out for. And I'm very TBD there. I feel better about it than I did a month ago, but I think it's fair to not all the way be there. Number 2, young players, especially Rob, are struggling. And I'll say this, Bones Highland and Jalen Clark, I'll consider young guys. They're both playing well. I think Bones, his efficiency is there, then and there. It's not always there, but I think the shot making, I think the energy, I think the playmaking have all been there. I think Bones is playing well. Jalen Clark continues to look like one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball. He has a really good feel for the moment, whether he hits a 3-point buzzer beater or he gets these and ones. He generates efficient offense. I think those two are pieces. I really do. I tweeted about it the other day. Let's sign those two on 3-year, $20 million contracts and call it a Merry Christmas, because I think these guys can be in that core, even if Shannon and Rob aren't. And I think it's a fair question. Like, a big question I have about Rob and Shannon, and these are questions in college, and they're really coming into life in the NBA. You could be a really good individual basketball player. But the NBA right now, there's so many good players around the world. It's less about getting the 12 best players on your team. It's more about getting your best couple players and then finding utility guys who can also play basketball, but be a good fit, right? Like Jalen Clark, for example, clearly a better player on this team than Terrence Shannon right now. But in the summer league, Terrence Shannon was an alpha. Jalen Clark wasn't. But what Jalen Clark is he's an excellent utility player. Terrence Shannon isn't right now. He's not a great defender. He doesn't have a right hand. His shooting's inconsistent, but he's very comfortable being a primary player. That's a question of Terrence Shannon. And I'm not sure how much room that has to change, because he's 25. He's older than Bones Highland somehow. And then Rob Dillingham, same thing. He's clearly struggled adapting to a role in this team. Were these just really good players who just their games don't scale in the NBA that well on great teams out of the gate? It's a fair question. And then to the Ant supporting cast, I mean, a lot of cores are inconsistent. Like, look at the Thunder. Thunder look like they're one of the best teams in the league. They're 25-4. They're struggling figuring out J-Dub and Chet. That team's inconsistent. I would say the Knicks cast is inconsistent. I would say the Nuggets historically has been inconsistent. I mean, all these teams are going to have inconsistent cores at the time when it's not your best player. But I would say it is pretty good that Minnesota has a Gobert who's so bankable right now, and Randall's been a little more inconsistent or more consistent, I would say, this year. Like, he's had a little bit of a slump lately, but overall, I would say he's been pretty good. Not that concerned. I do think your fourth point, though, the aging point guard issues. I mean, Rob Dillingham shooting 35% from the field, and Mike Conley's not far off. I mean, that's unacceptable. Dante's not a point guard. He's a shooting guard. I never like seeing Dante shoot off the dribble or do much with the ball. I want him to shoot. I want him to get in the flow, hit pull-ups, hit floaters, make a connective read, defend, play hard. I'm asking him to be a shooting guard. They don't have a point guard. And what took them down in the conference finals, of course, last year is the fact they lacked ball handlers, and OKC exploited that. I really do think they still need a point guard on this roster if they are serious about we're challenging the Thunder right now. If you're challenging the Oklahoma City Thunder, you need another point guard, because that is their anecdote. Kind of like a couple years ago when Minnesota, they couldn't get a rebound. They couldn't stop the bigs in Memphis. And then they get Rudy Gobert, who also is a great challenge for Denver, which was the elite team of the West at that time, right? Minnesota with Tim Connolly has historically done very well just finding, okay, this is what the best teams in the league. Here's the counter to that. Let's go get that guy. They need to do that too. I do think they need a point guard. And then Paulie G also said the same thing. I still think they need a point guard upgrade to be a serious contender. I do have some concerns about Finch's game management and handling of young players. Tough schedule upcoming. So very similar points. I would say Chris Finch has an opportunity this year. This is his 6th year, so I think there is a lot of pressure. If we enter this playoff this year, and a lot of the reason why they lose is because they don't know when to call a timeout. They are just getting out-coached late in games, situational basketball, whether it's Mark Daigneault or Udoka or some of these great coaches in the West. If Finch gets out-coached in the playoffs, I think it's fair to have the Mark Jackson conversation, where can Mark Jackson, or does Minnesota need somebody else to ignite this team or enhance the growth of the young players? It's a fair question. I think Finch is a good coach. I don't think that's an answer we'll have until at the end of the season, but it's something to watch out for, no doubt. And then last one I want to talk about from someone named Patrick. They're very good. If they figure out their crunch time turnover issues, they'll make another Western Conference, and that's where another ball handler would be helpful, right? Minnesota's associated with Kobe White, Colin Sexton, not necessarily elite game managers. If they can get a TJ McConnell or just the fact you have multiple dynamic ball handlers, I think that helps Minnesota because it gives them more optionality to counter defenses late in games. Somebody maybe that's Ant too, just having a better instinct on when to control the game late, when to slow down, when to take a shot if you're Ant, when to make a read. I think that comes down to Ant, and that comes down to maybe adding another ball handler to this team. The Suns game was really ugly early in the year. The Kings game was really ugly. So Minnesota does need to figure that out. But, I would agree that at this point, that's probably the single biggest question. Just does this team have the ball handlers to really beat those elite teams that have so many defenders to throw at you, whether it's the Rockets with Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, Reed Shepard's become something there. They have a Dorian Finney-Smith there. Like, they have a lot of options in Houston. Denver has more options than last year. Oklahoma City, of course, has the most options. So it's a real question with this team, but I do love the theme of these responses, which is they are on their way. They are playing much better. I think it's a great spot to be in December where your team is really good, where you're winning 2/3 of your games, and you still feel like you have so much to improve from after making back-to-back Western Conference Finals. Like, I think this team is in a fantastic spot. Thank you all so much for listening to this holiday edition of Wilder Wolves. We'll be back after the Nuggets game, and it's always an honor. Make sure to subscribe and like this video. You guys are the best. It's an honor, and I hope you guys have a very, very Merry Christmas. This is Wilder Wolves, Hall of Fame mode fandom.